Join us now on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/art-of-photography. Welcome to the Art of Photography. My name is Ted Forbes, and today we're doing a kind of a special series of podcasts from my friend Michael's studio. And we're going to go in the darkroom in a minute, but what I want to do first is I got some questions in the forums off the Flickr group on the differences between negative sizes. And so I want to talk a little bit about that today. And for those of you who are used to shooting digital, that kind of thing, maybe this is a new concept. So what we can do is kind of show you some different sizes and types. The negative type or size that most people are familiar with is 35 millimeter. Your dad probably had a 35 millimeter camera. You probably had one as a kid. Maybe you still shoot on 35 millimeter. But it produces, if you ever remember, you got your prints back from the lab and they had these little sleeves in here with your negatives in them. And this particular one has about 6 shots on it. But you can see that they're pretty small. And then what you use is you use an enlarger to actually go in and bump that size up when you make a print. The next size up, we're talking about 120 film. I want to go all the way really big here for a minute and talk about 4x5 film, which is actually 4 inches by 5 inches, hence the name 4x5. And you can see in this particular sheet that there are 4 of these. So the difference between your little 35 millimeter strip and the 4x5 is pretty vast. So you can think of it this way: the bigger the negative, the more information it's going to hold. So it's kind of like on digital cameras, CMOS sensors, they usually, obviously the bigger the sensor, the higher resolution. The same holds true for film, for transparencies. So what I want to show you here is a 4x5 camera and show you how that works. This is actually Michael's camera, and it's a field camera, which means simply studio cameras and field cameras. Studio cameras are usually a little bit bigger and a little less mobile, and this is a little Wista. Field cameras are often made out of wood, and this one's got a really cool old feel to it. It has a bellows system, and this shoots these 4x5 transparencies or 4x5 negatives. And you're going to use this is the negative holder right here. And simply you load these in complete darkness, because if you get any light, you'll obviously expose your negative. So you need to either be in a dark room or use a changing bag or something like that. We've kind of talked about these in previous episodes, but basically the film is loaded inside, and then on the exterior you have what's called the dark slide, which keeps the light out. Then once it's loaded inside the back of the camera, then you pull the dark slide up, which exposes the film. Now it's still dark inside the camera until you click the shutter. And you'll determine an exposure, and we'll get into that in another podcast, but you determine your exposure time, which is the amount of time needed to expose the film and get the picture on there. And then you shut it, and then you simply close the dark slide, pull it out, and you can flip it over because these hold 2. But anyway, the 4x5 cameras are really neat. They feature bigger lenses because, again, you're in higher resolution at this point. And usually they're equipped with a bellows system, which is basically keeps things dark as you move the front standard forward and backward. And this allows you to do everything from macro focusing up to full infinity focus if you're shooting a landscape. So anyway, that's basically the difference between formats here with 35 and 4x5. And what we're going to do in a second is go over to the light table here, and we're going to show you how to read a negative and actually show you the differences between a couple other different film types as well. So okay, we're over here at the light table now, and I want to show you some differences in film type and differences in negatives. This is a great light table. It's really big. It's got a nice big working surface. And light tables are specifically used for once you've shot a bunch of film and you need kind of a working space to actually go in and inspect what you've got, pick your shots that you want to print, things like that, without actually having to print everything first. This is a nice workspace to be able to go through. You can use what's called a loop here, and on smaller film like 35 millimeter, you can pop that down on the top, look through it, and act as a magnifying glass, so you can actually start to look for details, things like that, depending on what you shot. The 3 main types of film are black and white negative film, color negative film, which looks like this, and then color positive film, which is probably most familiar for people as this is what's normally referred to as slide film. So if you grew up in the 70s and people came back from vacation, they love to show endless hours of slide footage, but it's basically a color positive film, so it's what you see is what you get coming out of the camera. On the negative films, the image is actually reversed in terms of light. On the black and white negative, what's black in your image that you photograph becomes white on the negative, and what was white in the image becomes black on the negative. This process is reversed here. It will reverse again when you go do a print in the darkroom. And then on color negative film, it's the same thing. You can see that all the colors are actually switched over and inverted into their negative form. And so those are the three film types that you can shoot on. The other thing I want to talk about here is the size difference in these negatives. And you can see here, as I just showed you over the 4x5 camera, okay, this is a sheet of 35mm film strips. And next to that you can see we've got in this sheet some medium format film, which shoots a 6x6. This is much like what your Holga would do. And you can see that it's roughly about 4 times the size of the 35mm negative. Now remember, the bigger the negative, the more information it's holding. So if you're looking for if you want your prints to be really sharp, using bigger negatives is certainly a smart thing to do to achieve that. And you can see next to this you have the 4x5 negatives, which are even larger than that. So obviously a 4x5 is going to hold much more information than a medium format, and certainly much more information than a 35. Does that make one format superior over the others? Probably not. I think the main advantage is 35mm film. When the 35mm camera became popular, it really changed photography because of its portability and the fact that you could all of a sudden go take journalism photos and street photos that didn't require a lot of setup. Whereas 4x5 cameras, just due to the nature of their size, the fact that I could shoot one shot at a time using a film holder, those end up being a little more kludgy in that regard, and are a little more time intensive to make each exposure. So there's always kind of, everything in photography is kind of a give and a take. If you are going to take something, you've got to give up something else, and maybe it's convenience, maybe it's quality, maybe it's size. So those are the three types of film that we've been discussing, and these are also the three sizes of film we've been discussing. So join us next time when we actually go into the darkroom and show you how print is made.